Yeah, I think that this is a big story. It's actually a big scandal, of course. But the story
Yeah.
at large is this, is that, and we even have a very precise starting date for it in essence. So in 1980, the American Psychiatric Association published the third edition of its Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And this, even though it's an American manual, the ideas and the concepts are basically then exported around the world. And at that moment, what the American Psychiatric Association did, they said, we're going to adopt a disease model for categorizing mental disorders. And that was different from before. Before, if you look in DSM-1 and DSM-2, there's this understanding that often mental disorders and mental distress is a reaction to an environment. In other words, something's going wrong in your life, that sort of thing. But, and to just understand why we have this big change, is in the 1970s, American psychiatry felt under attack. It was an anti-psychiatry movement within the academic setting, saying that psychiatrists function more as for purposes of social control than as a real medical discipline. And also, their main drug at this time, their most popular drug, were benzodiazepines. They were seen as becoming addictive and problematic over the long term. And so there really was this, and finally, there was no evidence that talk therapy given by psychiatrists was any better than talk therapy given by counselors and psychologists. So psychiatry felt its future, its whole sort of place in society was being threatened. And they said to themselves, well, what is the image that has such prestige in society? It's the image of a doctor in a white coat. It's not the image of someone sitting at the end of the couch talking to a person. Those shrinks got made fun of. But doctors in white coats are symbols of people who have, treat diseases. They have antibiotics that treat diseases, that sort of thing. And so they said, we need to rebrand ourselves as real doctors, as doctors in white coats. And in order to rebrand themselves, they're going to say, we're going to reconceive psychiatric disorders as diseases of the brain, okay? And that's what they did. And then they began promoting that idea to the public in various ways, in books. They did media training sessions for psychiatrists. They reached out to the media, et cetera. And by the way, the pharmaceutical company loved this reconception of things because you can't sell drugs for unhappiness related to, losing your job or getting a divorce, but you can sell drugs for anxiety, the disease, or depression. So what happened was there was a commercial and trade interest in telling a new story, and that's the story they told. We were told that, researchers have found that depression and other major disorders are due to chemical imbalances in the brain. Now, that's a story of A, great progress, and B, it is a story of diseases of the brain or abnormalities in the brain. And then we heard that they had drugs that could fix those chemical imbalances, like insulin for diabetes, and now we have that disease story planted in the human, in society, okay? And with that idea of antidepressants and antipsychotics that they fix chemical imbalances, you think, wow, they're probably really effective, and you need them for long term. And that's the story we organized ourselves around. These were diseases of the brain characterized by chemical imbalances, and we had very effective drugs that fixed those drugs, like as if they were an antidote to that problem. And I hope this is okay. It was all bullshit. It was all a marketing story because and I believed it, by the way. When I wrote about this story early on in the 1990s as someone covering medicine for a newspaper, I wrote about these great advances. Oh, they're discovering the depression is a disease. They're discovering it's
going to interject here very quickly. So let's go back then. So before 1980, so during the 70s, because I think I read this in your book, psychiatry then was in a place of turmoil because it was on the verge of collapse. Would that be accurate to say?
Its position in society was on the verge
in psychiatry, and it was because of. Remember, there was a big film back then, right? Wasn't it?
One
Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something.
Yes, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a Oscar winner, incredibly popular. And what did you see in that film? Which was set in a hospital? it wasn't the patients who were really crazy. It was the doctors who were really crazy, the psychiatrists who were really crazy. And that had a great influence about like, yeah, we were all laughing at psychiatrists. They're the crazy ones. That was part of their sort of diminishment of respectability in American society. Why should you go to a crazy person?
Yeah. So from there onwards, they came up with a plan. Then they had to rebrand themselves, remarket themselves to the public, and basically present themselves in a completely new way to gain that credibility back.
Exactly. And that's what they did. They reconceptualized things with their publication of DSM-3. They said these are diseases of the brain. There was a famous book by Nancy Andreasen called The Broken Brain, which was published in 1984. And that's what it said. This is a new conception. These are diseases of the brain, just like hypertension is or diabetes is. Now, if you read it carefully, she said, we actually haven't found the evidence for that yet, but we're confident we're going to. But that's not the message the public got. Wow. The public got that was that he had found these biological causes. So writ large, which was the beginning of this discussion, is psychiatry rebranded themselves, but they did so in the guise of science. We're making these scientific advances. And we're geared as a society to believe in science. So that new story had such an impact on us. We believed it. And by the way, it did elevate the status of psychiatrists because suddenly they had their own magic pills, to treat people with all these different ills we suffer from.